Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Finance Committee meeting of the Board of Education for Monday, July 14th, 2025. Call our meeting to order. Item number 2 is public comment. I don't see anyone here tonight for public comments. We'll move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes. We have June 16th, 2025. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes at this time? Bonnie, did you receive any changes or corrections? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented in the packet?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign? All right, minutes are approved. Item number 4, discussion and consideration. We have tonight the 2025-2026 tentative budget, just when we thought we were done with budget talk. We are back. So, Mr. Latham, we are ready for you.
All right, well, good evening to the Finance Committee. I'm sorry I missed the last meeting. It's probably a good opportunity for Adrian to come before you and talk to you about our finances. So I'm going to follow up from that conversation with the 25-26 tentative budget. It goes from July 1st of 25 through June 30th of 26, and we're going to call that our fiscal year 2026. So here's a little bit about the timeline. We started with preliminary budgets with technology in January, transportation in March, operations and maintenance in April, and our education fund was in May. We brought to you the draft budget last month in June, and today we're here with the July tentative budget. Once this is done, we'll put it on file for 30 days. I picked a nice clean date from August 1st to August 31st, and then we'll come back before the Finance Committee and the Board of Education requesting final approval and adoption of the budget on September 8th. It'll also be an opportunity for us to have a truth in taxation and public hearing, and we'll also cover any required public acts at that time. So a little bit about our revenues. They're focused primarily at the local level. Those are really just primarily taxes, but they also include other things that we would receive, such as registration fees, parking fees, items of that nature. Our state revenues are primarily our evidence-based funding, which is consistent over the years because we're of the tier status that we are. And then lastly, any state reimbursements that we have. And then our federal are grants such as like our IDEA. Our expenses are our salaries. Those are basically contractual. Those are through collective bargaining agreements, and those are working agreements. We provide employee benefits, which are primarily health benefits, but also would include areas such as our pension obligations through IMRF and TRS. Our purchase services, those are usually professional services that we acquire. Think of things, I always say, the easiest ones to remember are architects and engineers and legal fees. And then lastly, our supplies and materials, which is our daily items that we need. Everything from doorknobs or dish soap. And then lastly is our capital outlay, which are $3,000 or more, part of our capital projects. So they can also be embedded in a particular fund, but also into our Fund 60, which is our capital projects. Our other objects are mostly our tuition that we have. They also include our debt service and any transfers. And then lastly, our non-capital are less than $3,000. And then our fund balances are estimated at the end of June, and they don't become final until we have our external audit completed. So some of our considerations are equal assessed value trends. Is the property value in our school district trending upward, and therefore has more value? What we receive for the 2024 estimated tax year levy, so those are receipts of taxes we get in 2025. May and June fall in the current fiscal year, and July through our last payment in either October or November come in fiscal year 25-26. So we do review those tax receipts. So tonight you'll see some changes in our revenue. You'll see that primarily because we always would anticipate a 50-50 split between the two revenue receipts of those taxes. But sometimes some people have those escrowed and they pay more. So you're going to see a little bit of adjustment more to like that 52%, 48%. So you'll see some of our revenue go up because I have the levy, we received at least 2 payments, and I've adjusted the taxes between the years, and then I can forecast out what a levy might look like when I come back in December for the 25 tax year payable in 26. And then our estimated personal property replacement tax, that is anticipated to go down dramatically. Our school fees, which is registration, participation, athletic, I put other, but other always means parking to me. And our interest income. So when you see our fund balance go down, that also means I have a smaller pool to invest. So I pulled back our interest income for 2 reasons: the amount I can invest, and also my estimation of a less return on investment because of the rates. Then our state revenue is basically based upon our evidence-based funding. I put about 2.144 million in the education fund and 2.144 million in the operations and maintenance fund. We also have any title grants, so you'll see some adjustments today. I did have a chance to review some of our grants, so we have an idea what will be our final claim that will come in as revenue, but also what some of those expenses are. I have reduced or increased some of those based upon some grant funding. And then lastly, we'll see some of our alternative learning opportunity funding come in. It did come in higher this year, so that means we're using more of that particular grant opportunity. And lastly, our federal grants, mostly things like IDEA. So Perkins, we do have some carryover funds. I won't know that. The biggest question mark this year is how much we'll get in federal dollars, and that'll have an impact between now and when I come back for an adoption budget in September. So here are some other considerations. I always anticipate full staffing and all of our part-time FTE included in the budget. Our employee benefits, which is our federal income tax, our Medicare, our IMRF, our TRS, which those two are pensions, and our health plans that we have, our HMO, PPO, also includes dental and life when we offer a health package. And then our purchase services, keep in mind too, that also includes professional development. So that is something that occurs across the district. And almost every employee that we have receives some kind of professional development because that's something we focus on more and more each year. Supplies and materials are always affected by inflationary costs. Inflation seems to be continuing trending downward in the 2.4%, but that's smoothed out over the year before we get to the actual CPI. And then we also have availability of some of the items. It's gotten much better over the years. Capital outlay, I mentioned, has a threshold to it. Our other objects are our tuition, debt service, and our transfers, and then our non-capital has below the threshold. One of the issues that'll happen between now and when I come back is a more better number. That's a technical term, more better number from our auditors, because I'll have a chance to sit with them, go through our financials for last year, and make any adjusting journal entries that we have to kind of true up anything. And then lastly is our capital plan. We still had some funds left over from when we levied before, and we're still spending those down. You'll see that in the capital plan tonight. All right, so I'm going to focus on the tentative budget only. Then I'm going to explain to you why some of those numbers have changed. So this is the estimated education fund. Our local dollars are $77,363,750. Most of that adjustment that has gone up is that those taxes I mentioned. So I went back and looked to see when we received taxes, and I made that adjustment off of what we received. And then I'll also make the forecast out for what CPI and a levy might look like. But then our state revenue for the ed fund is $3,316,272, and that's pretty stable for the most part. There's just a little bit of a claim that we had that will come into this particular year. And then lastly, our federal dollars of $1,800,000. And I had already reduced those, as you can see, from what we would have got in 25 into 26, so I didn't make too much of adjustment. Well, there are some final grant dollars that we had. So I estimate at this point in time $82,484,022 as the estimated revenue for education fund. Please stop me at any time if you have questions. All right, a little bit about our expense side. So our tentative budget for salaries did increase to $58,297,105. Those were just some adjustments that I made after I reviewed some of the salaries that we had come in, and that's after I added anyone that we anticipated retiring that maybe did or did not, and that's my best estimate this time looking at last year's salaries. The second item is our benefits. I did increase that slightly to $10,730,000 roughly, and that's because I've seen again some movement from single to family benefits, so I did change that. Our purchase services are at $6,677,045. I would point out the difference is as I reviewed our grant dollars, I did also increase our food service, so there's an additional cost of that as we go into year 3 of a 5-year contract. I did have some contract nurses, some costs of that I had to include, as well as some costs for covering some of the maybe FMLA errors that we might have. We do anticipate our copy services to go up, so that contract is going to end that we have, and I expect that cost to go up, so I added some there. and just a little bit for something as simple as instrument repair. When we look at our supplies and materials, that's pretty much stable with the last time, $1,982,333. Capital outlay stayed the same, other objects the same, and our non-capital equipment was the same. So it did increase from $81,181,090 in the draft budget to an estimated $83,816,854 in the tentative budget. And those are the reasons why. So we start off with a beginning balance of $30,068,665,000. I mentioned our revenues and our expenses. At this point in time, I would anticipate a need for a $3 million transfer from the Ed Fund to Fund 20. That'll cover and help pay for the capital projects that we have. So the estimated fund balance will be $25,735,833. So it is reduced significantly, but not as low as it was historically since I've been here. Again, but something we should keep track of because that is a fund that's a major fund for us, and it is our general fund. All right, so a little bit about the operations and maintenance fund. Just a little bit of a change there was, again, in the taxation area. The state evidence-based fund is the same, so that just had a slight increase to $15,823,129. Looking at some of the salary costs, I did adjust that downward, and you might say, why would that be? And that's a really good question. So one of the things I looked at is some of the cost savings that we had with some of our retirements. We did have some key people retire. We had 2 top people in that particular work area that had been replaced. So we promoted one, and then there was another replacement of that. As well as the fact that after Mr. Dower had a chance to look at some of our operations, we did have a few positions that we eliminated that were deemed not to be necessary anymore. So we made those adjustments as well. So those are some of the reasons why. So I'll continue to look at that, and it did seem like that last year the salary I again estimated in fiscal year 25 at 5.2 million, and it came in at 4.7. So I did a couple more adjustments and reviews, and I'm pretty comfortable this time with that number. But again, a lot of that effect on that is actually our staffing. So if we don't get the staffing we need, then we'll have some more costs in areas such as our purchase services. So our benefits did decrease a little bit. I did take a look at those, and I adjusted those accordingly to the benefit usage by the employees in that particular fund to $1,123,437. Our purchase services remains the same. We do have some contractual obligations that we've used before for shortages that we have for some of our custodial staffing that's in there as well. Our materials and supplies is the same. Capital outlay went up slightly just to make some adjustments of some things that we will need. Our other objects is our contingencies, and our non-equipment's the same. So we went from 14.4 to 13.9 million, just a slight change in that. So we began an estimated fund balance starting at $8,399,085. I spoke about the revenues. We will need to transfer about $3,229,000 from the Ed Fund and Fund 40 into this particular fund. It'll have estimated expenditures at about $13.9 million, and the ultimate transfer amount that will move to Fund 60 for capital projects is that $7,729,000, leaving this fund an estimated balance of $5,708,515, and so that's being drawn down as well. All right, the debt service just had a little bit of change. Again, that's taxes in there, and no change in expenses. So just a slight increase in this particular fund balance. One of the areas that we will take a look at is some of our interest income. We may reallocate that to some different funds that we can use those funds better. I did notice from when I started here to now we seem to accumulate some of our fund balances in this particular fund just because the county always levies a little bit more for us, and it's kind of caught up to us. We did spend those down in prior years when we did some refunding, so I'll have to review the need for interest income in this particular fund, or it's more appropriate probably someplace else. Transportation fund. All right, so I did increase the salaries there. It was mostly due to our working agreement, and I think that's the biggest change that we had in this particular fund. Other than that, it was pretty much stable. And so I did review those and made that change because I felt it was more appropriate to put a little higher number in here for those purposes. Revenues. Sorry. That was the, kind of messed it up, didn't I? All right, so that was taxes, $4,666,904. And then I went back and looked at salaries, and I did reduce those slightly. Nothing more than just reviewing what some of our costs have been out there. We did have some retirees. Superintendent knows that as well. We went out for a couple of those, so we did have some longer-term drivers that had retired, so I adjusted that accordingly. Other than that, pretty much the rest of this particular fund is the same. So it went from $5.1 million to $5,028,186. I will note that the capital outlay for $1.4 million is our bus purchases for next year. All right, so we start off with a $5,038,067 fund balance. Our revenues were $4,666,904. That's the expenditures that we've mentioned. We will be moving the $229,000 over to Fund 20. That will cover some items such as the addition of the extra propane tank, as well as some of the parking lot costs that we had in there. So this will leave the fund balance of $4,447,785. So the reason the fund got so high, as you recall, is because we didn't buy buses, so we are spending that down. In most years, it's been in the $2 million, so we're trying to reduce that back to a more appropriate level. Retirement fund is the same. The benefits is the same, so there's not much change in that fund. It does have a little bit of an increase only because we have some excess revenue. Oops, mostly that's due to investments. This is our capital project, so we estimate $125,000. That's interest income only, and then I laid out for you how the funds will come over from some of the other areas. So some of the funds will move into O&M and Fund 20, and they'll move out in this Fund 60. So $3 million in education, the $229,000 I mentioned in transportation, and then the total amount then will come out. We'll need about $4.5 million out of the O&M fund to make the capital project fund work this year. So in total, we look at about $8,034,379 of capital outlay we'll be spending this year if the board approves the capital projects that are there. So we did have a fund balance of $1.2 million. That is our revenues as stated. Those are expenditures. Those will be the transfers. And then we'll end up with a little bit of decrease from the fund balance of $1,023,430,000. That still allows a fair amount of cushion there to absorb anything that we have, any changeovers or extras. As you know, we have had a couple projects that we had to go back and get some additional funds to make some of those work, such as stabilizing the base for some of our parking areas. This is our working cash. No change for there from the draft budget. And there are no expenses for that fund. That'll continue to grow because this is our investment fund. So we're looking at a little over 17.6 million. So we still expect some good returns. We've laddered out the investments 5 years. Again, we used to get 5 point something in a CD. We're now looking at the 4s, but we'll still have a good return for our investment. TOR fund, no change from the draft budget. Had an increase as well, just from interest income. And then lastly, this is our fire prevention safety fund, estimated $20,000 for interest income. I need to reduce that for a couple of reasons, as I'd mentioned before, but also because that fund's going to be drawing down as well, so there's less to invest. 126,647 is the estimated capital projects cost that's dedicated in the presentation at the regular board meeting. That reflects the life health safety amount.
Can you go back one slide?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at the significant drop from what we budgeted last year to where we're going to be in the future. Can you give a little bit of background why we budgeted 700,000, we only spent 300, and next year we're only expecting 126?
Well, that comes from our operations and maintenance director. So the first one would have been an inherited number from several years ago that we levied against. There probably are some items still left on there that might be a B or C item that we haven't gotten to yet, that were originally planned to be completed. And so those may come in subsequent years. So the reason that number was so large is because we had to levy for that, and we just levied that one time, and now we just keep spending it down. So that's the reason that number was so large in the first place. So we took the life, health, safety, and we levied for the full amount. That would be anything in the A, the B, and the C categories. And we haven't done all those yet because they cover a 10-year period of time. And so some of those will still be to come that just haven't occurred yet. So we estimate the fund balance for life, health, safety at $569, $20,000 revenue, $126,647 in our expense, reducing the fund balance to $493,922. All right, so here's some areas that may change. We may have some non-payment of taxes. We could see a plus or minus in enrollment. That would affect some of the fees that we collect. State funds or carryover items. Some of our reimbursement rates might change. Sometimes those are affected by our EAV. A large EAV reduces some of our reimbursement levels. And then lastly, the one that I mentioned I'm most concerned about is changes in federal funding for some of our programs. Expenses, some of the changes that could occur is if we have understaffing and we have some post-budget changes to our employee benefits. I think you can see in the end of year June, it was pretty good with what I estimated for revenue and expenses, so there's always a little bit of a cushion there for things such as purchase services if we have some overages or some project changes. There could be some supply and demand issues too with tariffs and CPI, and some of our supply chain is always affected by availability or weather. And then some of our tuition changes are based upon our enrollment and our attendees. And then lastly, just some unforeseen breakages or equipment failures. Last thing we'll have to look at is our fund balances. Our auditors will take a look at those as well. And we'll have a better number when we get to the final budget for our beginning fund balance. Slide so big it was off the... Okay, so this is the total revenue that was estimated. The last line is the $20,000 for the fire safety. So for the fiscal year 25-26, the total revenue was $122,169,923. And this is our estimated expenditures. I guess I should have came down here and made this slide fit. Estimated expenditures are $128,577,990. So we have more expenses than we have revenue. That last item on the far right was our fire safety at $126,647. So this is the big picture. So we estimate all of the beginning fund balances at $74,576,153. Our total revenues of $122,169,923. Our total expenditures of $128,577,990, leaving us an estimated fund balance of $68,168,086. That would include and accounted for our fund transfers that would occur to fund our capital projects. When I went back and just looked at some of our revenue to expenses, the only areas that we had some deficits were in Fund 10 and Fund 40, and the rest of the funds had positive numbers, with the exception of, Fund 90 had a negative number as well, just because it has a limited revenue capability. So overall, very confident this looks like a pretty good budget at this point, and we'll just make some final changes before we bring it to the board for adoption. So
Go
this
back.
is a,
You could just go back one slide. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I just wanted to look at
Yeah.
Sorry. Balance, okay.
There's a percentage you have to be above before you have to submit a plan to the state. What is that percentage of your total budget? Is it 33% or something like that? You can't be below. If you're below that, you have to submit.
well, we have a fund balance policy in general for all of our funds. What it really looks at is I can't go into the negative. So even though I can have a negative from revenue minus expenditures, it really comes down to a negative fund balance, and none
Right.
of our funds have a negative fund balance. It's an automatic calculation. It flags it. It just makes me report a way to correct it. So I don't foresee it in this particular budget as well, just because our fund balances are there. Every one of them had a positive fund balance, so I don't foresee us having to run into the issue with the state and our reporting when we submit the budget.
So it just has to be positive, or did it?
It does, or all of them together create some undue.
Okay, so there's not a percentages.
Right.
I thought there was a percentage as well, but
Yeah,
okay.
thought we talked about that previously, but okay, must be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we follow our own fund balance policy, but the state does that if you go below a level. I don't think we've reached it. I'll have to research if there actually is one per fund. I just follow one in the aggregate.
I understand.
I do think that's what we're talking, one in the aggregate, not one per fund.
Per fund, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
in the
yeah,
aggregate,
yeah.
and I feel like I should know that off the top of my head, 30 or 35 around
Okay.
one of
Yeah,
those.
30 is our policy.
30's the policy.
30, okay.
There you go. That's,
the number I was
okay.
And then just again, the timeline that we'll try to finish all this up. I did originally try to anticipate us passing this the second meeting that we would have in August. I did push it back. A couple reasons. One, I'm selfish and my son's getting married, so I didn't want to rush the budget. But also there's two benefits to having it in September. The audit will be done by that point. I need just a little bit more time with a new financial system to import the data, export it into the state fund, because we always have what we call exceptions. They don't line up perfectly in account numbers. I have to do that by hand. So with the new system, I wanted to allocate myself some more time to test it, proof it before I delivered it. At the last adoption meeting in September, it also gives me a chance to see what some of the payroll numbers look like from the first payroll run, which should be all the hires we have to start the school year. And then lastly, it will come to you in the actual state form, but I'll still give you a presentation much like tonight, but also embedded in that summary page from the state form, but you will also get the state form. So, all right, I believe that concludes my presentation.
When do we have to have it in by?
The end of September.
End of September. Okay.
So we'll have a chance to still, if there's an issue, have one more meeting before we have to pass it and file it with the county and the state. Okay, that concludes my presentation.
The only other question, thank you for all this, and it looks like a good budget for next year. My question is in regard to if there is, I know we're gonna talk about it tonight, but the cash in lieu and for the if money from that comes in, where does that hit the revenue? What line item would that be?
Yeah, so that's a restricted amount of revenue that goes into the operations and maintenance fund.
Oh, it
So,
does, okay.
currently, I can tell you what that number is. So currently we have $735,000, roughly almost $736,000. It would go into that as well, and then we're required to spend it within a period of time, but it has to be spent to benefit all the children of that development. So I can give you an example where I tried to spend it once, but I was given legal advice not to. So when we did the transportation expansion, I asked if we could use those funds, and I was advised probably not, because not all those students would ride a bus. Probably more appropriate when we look at our capital plan down the road to move some of those funds out of Fund 20 for those developer fees and use those for improvements on the high school, because all students would theoretically go to the high school or the middle school. But I think that's probably the best use. So at some point we may move those funds out and use those and let the new funds from future development come in and go into that particular category. And I have to do that by law to segregate those.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much
Thank you.
for that. Okay, item number 5, future agenda items. As we just discussed, we will have the 2025-2026 final budget coming up in another meeting. Number 6, items for recommendation to the full board. We have the 2025-2026 tentative budget to move on. Do I have a motion to move that to the full board?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, we move that on to the full board. Item number 7 is information legislative update. I don't have anything, Dr. Barrett? For
No,
our
nothing to
meeting?
share today.
Okay, that leads us to item 8, adjournment. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you.